The women of the WWE are getting their very own pay-per-view. We've come a long way, babies. I'm Chris Wolvie, the wrestling blogger who always tells it like it is. In late October of this year, the WWE will present Evolution, the first ever all-female WWE pay-per-view. Raw and SmackDown ladies will join with legends, and I'm pretty confident some NXT ladies in this once-in-a-lifetime event. That is, unless they make it an annual thing, which I'm not against, but I think it'll be hard to pull off year after year. In any case, it's been a long time coming, and I do mean long time. See, back in the 50s and 60s, women's wrestling was essentially a novelty. After all, very few men of the time wanted to see women competing in a predominantly men's sport. It was a different time. Still, the WWE at the time wanted to legitimize it somehow, so they created a women's championship. The longtime owner of this title was, of course, the fabulous Moolah. And say what you will about what she was like outside the ring, but she was the true queen of the squared circle. Mostly because no one else was as marketable. She would put her title up, sure, but no one could dethrone her. Still, she did pack houses at Madison Square Garden, and she was cheered for it, so, hey, it was a start, right? Of course, Moolah couldn't stay on top forever. She gave Leilani Kai and Wendy Richter chances to hold the gold, and finally fell back to those like Sensational Sherry and Rockin' Robin. Slowly but surely, more women started to integrate into the roster, and although the women's elimination match at the Survivor Series would be the only 5-on-5 match of that kind for decades, it showed that the WWE was still committed to having the skillful ladies around. But then the 90s happened, and it was a dark time for women's wrestling, and wrestling as a whole, but mostly women's. See, the WWE went in quite the different route of thinking when it came to the so-called fairer sex. They felt that the still predominantly young male audiences didn't want to see the girls fight. They just wanted them to be seen. So the new recruits to the women's division had some skill, but they were more eye candy. I mean, hell, the biggest honor that could be bestowed on a female in the WWE those days was a Playboy cover and a spread. That's how low things got for them. Oh, I'm not saying none of them had skill. I mean, Trish Stratus, Lita, Jazz, Tori Wilson, Michelle McCool, they could tussle, but they were mainly there for the young men who were the core audience of the shows. And man, did they ever exploit the hell out of those looks. Evening gown matches, bra and panties matches, mud pit matches, in case you thought that was just a novelty in some bars in the 70s. Pillow fights, anything that was thought of as degrading to the women of the WWE gladly participated in. The low point, I think, was at the first Armageddon in 1999, which I attended, mind you, when Miss Kitty won the Women's Championship in an evening gown in a pool match. And Moolah and Mae Young had to watch that as guest refs. But the true nadir was when Kitty stripped out of her gown and then flashed the cameras. If showing off Kitty's puppies was the only thing that they could think of for the women to get noticed, well, let's just say this was the moment when I started to loathe women's wrestling. Well, between that and watching Glow. The actual show, not the Netflix show. That one's pretty cool. The turn of the century came and went, and things weren't looking much different for the ladies. But to their credit, they started to slowly see that the women did have skill. The aforementioned Stratus and Lita, along with Gail Kim and Molly Holly, showed the world that they had all that and wrestling prowess too. Now, I was starting to think that the ladies were getting more credibility despite Alundra Blaze's trashing of the title on Monday Nitro. That is until 2008, when SmackDown, feeling they needed a title to counter the women's title on Raw, came up with the Divas Championship. Okay, look, I know diva was meant to mean best of the best and worthy of your praise, but I think that only works in operas. In the modern world, divas are those who look down on other women, and men in some cases, and who demand your praise whether they deserve it or not. That turned me off. And after the brands started to reunite, the divas and women's titles were unified, and it was the divas title they kept. That ugly purple butterfly belt would stick around for years to come, and I hated it, folks. But then came Alundra Blaze's induction into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015. She let out her Medusa character from WCW and talked about the state of women in the WWE and pro wrestling in general. She then brought out a trash can and pulled out the women's title belt she trashed years before. She professed herself the true women's champion, and the crowd cheered her for it. And that, I believe, is when both the WWE staff and the WWE Universe suddenly realized that those strides have been made. They needed to put women more in the forefront. Now, the fans started the attack with their hashtag Give Divas a Chance rants on Twitter and other social media. They were tired of seeing these skilled women, and they were very skilled at this point, given short matches even on pay-per-views. This prompted Stephanie McMahon to start the Divas Revolution, introducing 3 new ladies from the NXT roster in the form of Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch. This was an adrenaline shot that the WWE needed. The matches between the 3 trios of women at the time were epic and showed the world that they were through with their women just looking pretty. Not that they didn't look pretty, but they could ram their boots up your ass if that's all you thought about them. 2016 was definitely a boon for women in the WWE, despite the you-know-what grabber elected that year. First of all, at WrestleMania, Lita came out before the main card and announced that the Divas title was no more, and that the triple threat match that night would be for the WWE Women's Championship. I smiled from ear to ear when Lita claimed that they were no longer divas, despite them keeping the name for the E! Network show, but superstars, just like the males. And then the women got to compete in matches we've only seen men in before. Iron Man, Extreme Rules, Steel Cage, Hell in a Cell, Money in the Bank ladder matches, and last winter both Royal Rumble and Elimination Chamber matches. And when the brand split again, SmackDown just called their female championship the SmackDown Women's title. Other women came into the fold of both brands like Asuka, the Riot Squad, Absolution, and the Iconics. And the women of the NXT continue to mold the future ladies in this business. Now, probably to make up for the fact that the women weren't allowed to compete in the Greatest Royal Rumble event, we have an all-women pay-per-view coming up in October, which starts to make me wonder if the Super SmackDown show earlier that month, will have any ladies in it. But no doubt, all 3 women's titles, Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, will be on the line that night. Legends will probably have one more match in their pockets against each other or against the newer breed. And if they have any respect for the women, they'll keep their bras and panties on, save the evening gowns for nights on the town, and for God's sakes, keep the mud pits and swimming pools out of the arena altogether. So, congrats to the women of the WWE. You deserved it then, you deserve it now, and if you keep it up, you'll deserve this honor forever. I'm Chris Wolvie, the wrestling blogger who always tells it like it is. See ya!